Good morning. We are continuing with our look at Hebrew poetry outside the book of Psalms. And today on day 184, we're looking at the poetry of Ecclesiastes. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 8. Everything that takes place in this world is timed by God's choice. There is a time to be born and a time to die. There is a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. There's a time to kill and a time to heal. There's a time to demolish and a time to build. There's a time to weep and a time to laugh. There's a time to mourn and a time to dance. There's a time to throw stones away and a time to collect them. There's a time for hugging and a time not to give hugs. There's a time to look for something and a time to lose it. There's a time to keep things and a time to throw things away. There's a time to rip and a time to sew. There's a time to keep your mouth shut and a time to speak up. There's a time for loving and a time for hating. There's a time for war and a time for peace. Ecclesiastes is the Latin name for Koheleth, which means preacher or teacher. Not many of us identify with this sour-faced person who has come to the conclusion that the vast majority of the effort we put into life is futile and pointless. He believes that everything is predetermined. And because all outcomes are inevitable, the best thing any of us can do is to grasp whatever enjoyment we can from the present moment. There are very few clues as to who wrote the book or why they were so miserable. Some have suggested that this was written by a wisdom scholar from Solomon's wisdom school on Solomon's behalf after Solomon had died, as a kind of sad memorial, because despite his wisdom, he hadn't lived forever, but died like all of us do. Today's few verses are the most familiar to us. They have been frequently used at funerals and memorial services, and have even been sung by folk singers. Some have taken them to mean that there will eventually be an opportunity for anything you might like to do. You just have to wait for the opportunity. But when you look at the rest of the chapter, you will realize that it really doesn't mean that. Our writer clearly believes that everything is pre-programmed and determined by God, and therefore it is God who decides when it is, for instance, the time to give someone a hug and when it's the time not to. Our Jewish midrash tried to widen the scope of these contrasting opportunities by suggesting that the verse about gathering or scattering stones is really about enjoying or abstaining from sex. But I think that commentator has gone too far. The book of Ecclesiastes enables us to visit a person who believes in a God who is in charge, and a God who is guilty of everything that happens, good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant. If you dwell in these regions for long, you can become quite depressed yourself. Thank goodness that's not the Bible's last word on the matter. Tomorrow we will visit a happier person, and we can be thankful that Jesus and the prophets gave us a much more gracious picture of God than Koheleth's harsh deity. See you tomorrow.